Side 3, Isle of the Dead, continuing on page 109. The entire north seemed to be on fire. If it were not that I possess a sense of absolute direction on all my worlds, I would have thought that I was heading into a sunrise. I found it quite disillusioning. Here was a Payan, almost a name, a member of the whole race of avengers who had ever lived. And here he was acting like a clown before the abominable Earthman. Okay, he hated me, and he wanted to get me. That was no reason to be sloppy about it, and to forget the fine old traditions of his race. The volcano was a childish display of the power I fully expected to meet eventually. I felt a bit ashamed for him, for such a crude exhibition at this point in the game. Even I, in my brief apprenticeship, had learned sufficient of the fine points of vengeance-ship to know better than that. I was beginning to see why he'd flunked his test. I chewed some chocolate as I walked, putting off lunch break until later in the afternoon. I wanted to cover sufficient ground so that I'd only have a few hours' hike in the morning. I maintained a steady pace, and the light grew and grew before me. The ashes came more densely down. The ground gave a good shake about once every hour. Around midday, a wart bear attacked me. I tried to control it, but I couldn't. I killed it, and cursed the man who had made it into what it was. The fog had let up a good deal by then, but the drifting ash more than compensated. It was a constant twilight through which I walked, coughing. I didn't make good time because of the rearrangements of the terrain, and I added another day to my hiking schedule. By the time I turned in that night, I'd covered a lot of ground, though. I knew I'd reach Acheron before noon of the following day. I found a dry spot for a campsite on a small rise with half-buried boulders jutting at odd angles about its crown. I cleaned my equipment, pitched the flimsy, kindled a fire, ate some rations. Then I smoked one of my last cigars to do my bit for air pollution, and crawled into the sack. I was dreaming when it happened. The dream eludes me now, save for the impression that it was pleasant at first, then became a nightmare. I remember tossing about on my bed of rushes, then realizing I was awake. I kept my eyes closed and shifted my weight as though moving in my sleep. My hand touched my pistol. I lay there and listened for the sounds of danger. I opened my mind to impressions. I tasted the smoke and cold ashes that had filled the air. I felt the damp chill on the ground beneath me. I got the impression of someone, something nearby. Listening, I heard the tiny click of a dislodged stone somewhere off to my right. Then silence. My finger traced the trigger's curve. I shifted the muzzle in that direction. Then, as delicately as a hummingbird invades a flower, came the touch of the tamperer in the dark house where I live, my head. "You are asleep," something seemed to say, "and you will not awaken yet. Not until I permit it. You sleep and you hear me now. This is as it should be. There is no reason to awaken. Sleep deeply and soundly as I address you. It is very important that you do so." I let it continue, for I was fully awake. I suppressed my reactions and feigned slumber while I listened for another telltale sound. After a minute of being reassured that I was asleep, I heard a sound of movement from the same direction as before. I opened my eyes then, and without moving my head I began to trace the limits of the shadows. Beside one of the rocks, perhaps 30 feet distant, was a form which had not been present when I had retired. I studied it until I detected an occasional movement. When I was certain as to its position, I flipped off the safety catch, aimed very carefully, and pulled the trigger, tracing a line of fire on the ground about 5 feet before it. Because of the angle, a shower of dust, dirt, and gravel was kicked backwards. "If you so much as take a deep breath, I'll cut you in half," I advised. Then I stood and faced him, holding the pistol steady. When I spoke in Payan, for I had seen in the light of the burning beam that it was a Payan who stood beside the rock. "Green," I said, "you are the clumsiest Payan I've ever met." "I have made a few mistakes," he acknowledged from back in the shadows. I chuckled. "I'd say so. There were extenuating circumstances involved. Excuses. You did not properly learn the lesson of the rock. It appears to rest, but it does move, imperceptibly." I shook my head. How will your ancestors rest after a bungled piece of vengeance like this? Poorly, I fear, if this be the end. Poorly, I fear, if this be the end. Why shouldn't it be? Do you deny that you assured my presence here solely for purposes of obtaining my death? Why should I deny the obvious? Why should I fail to do the logical thing? Think, Francis Sandow, Dras Sandow. How logical would it be? Why should I approach you in this fashion, when I might have allowed you to come to me where I held a position of power? Perhaps I rattled your nerves last evening. Do not judge me that unstable. I came to place you under my control, and failed. And failed. Why did you come? I require your services. To what end? We must leave here quickly. You possess a means of departure? Naturally. What are you afraid of? Over the years you have collected some friends and many enemies, Francis Sandow. Call me Frank. I feel as if I've known you a long time, dead man. You should not have sent that message, Frank. Now your presence here is known. Unless you help me to escape, you will face a vengeance greater than mine. A shifting of the breeze brought me the sweet, musty smell of that which passes for blood in a pagan. I flicked on my hand torch and aimed it at him. You're hurt? Yes. I dropped the torch, sidled over to my knapsack, opened it with my left hand. I fished out the first aid pouch and tossed it to him. Cover your cuts, I said, picking up the light once more. They smell bad. He unrolled a bandage and wrapped it about his gashed right shoulder and forearm. He ignored a series of smaller wounds on his chest. You look as if you've been in a fight. I have. What shape is the other guy in? I hurt him. I was lucky. I almost killed him, in fact. Now it is too late. I saw that he wasn't carrying a weapon, so I holstered my own. I advanced and stood before him. Delgren of Dilpe sends his greetings, I said. I think you've managed to make his fecal roster. He snorted, chuckled. He was to be next, he said, after yourself. You still haven't given me a good reason for keeping you alive. But I've aroused your curiosity, which is keeping me alive, getting me bandaged even. My patience departs, like sand through a sieve. Then you have not learned the lesson of the rock. I lit a cigarette. I'm in a position to choose my proverbs as I go along. You are not, I said. He finished bandaging himself, then, I wish to propose a bargain. Name it. You have a vessel hidden somewhere. Take me to it. Take me with you away from this world. In return for what? Your life. You're hardly in a position to threaten me. I am not making a threat. I am offering to save your life for the moment, if you will do the same for me. Save me from what? You know that I can restore certain persons to life. Yeah, you stole some recall tapes. How did you do it, by the way? Teleportation, it is my talent. I can transfer small objects from one place to another. Many years ago, when I first began studying you and plotting my vengeance, I made visits to Earth. Each time one of your friends or enemies died there, in fact. I waited then until I had accumulated sufficient funds to purchase this world, which I thought to be a fitting place for what I had in mind. It is not difficult for a worldscaper to learn to employ the tapes. My friends, my enemies, you restored them here? That is correct. Why? For you to see your loved ones suffer once again before you died yourself, and for your enemies to watch you in your pain. Why did you do what you did to the man called Dango? The man annoyed me. By setting him up as an example and warning for you, I also removed him from my presence and provided him with a maximum of pain. In this fashion he served 3 useful purposes. What was the third? My amusement, of course. I see. But why here? Why Illyria? Second to home free, which is inaccessible, is this world not your favorite creation? Yes. What better place, then? I dropped my cigarette, ground it out with my heel. "You are stronger than I thought, Frank," he said after a moment, "because you killed him once and he has beaten me, taken away from me a thing without price." Suddenly, I was back on home free in my roof garden, puffing a cigar, seated next to a shaved monkey named Louis Briggs. I had just opened an envelope, and I was running my eyes down a list of names. So it wasn't telepathy. It was just memory and apprehension. "Mike Shandon," I said softly. Yes. I did not know him for what he was, or I would not have recalled him. It should have hit me sooner. The fact that he had recalled all of them, I mean. It should have, but it didn't. I've been too busy thinking about Kathy and blood. "You stupid son of a bitch," I said. "You stupid son of a bitch." Back in the century into which I had been born, like number 20, the art or craft, as the case may be, of espionage, enjoyed a better public image than either the U.S. Marine Corps or the AMA. It was, I suppose, partly a romantic escape mechanism with respect to international tensions. It got out of hand, though, as anything must if it is to leave a mark upon its times. In the long history of popular heroes, from Renaissance princes through poor boys who live clean, work hard, and marry the boss's daughters, the man with a cyanide capsule for a tooth, the lovely traitress for a mistress, and the impossible mission where sex and violence are shorthand for love and death, this man came into his own in the 7th decade of the 20th century, and is indeed remembered with a certain measure of nostalgia, like Christmas in medieval England. He was, of course, abstracted from the real thing, and spies are an even duller lot today than they were then. They collect every bit of trivia they can lay their hands on, and get it back to someone who feeds it to a data processing machine, along with thousands of other items. A minor fact is thereby obtained, someone writes an obscure memo concerning it, and the memo is filed and forgotten. As I mentioned earlier, there is very little precedent for interstellar warfare, and classical spying deals basically with military matters. When this extension of politics becomes well-nigh impossible because of logistics problems, the importance of such matters diminishes. The only real, talented, important spies today are the industrial spies, the man who delivered into the hands of General Motors the microfilmed blueprints of Ford's latest brainchild, or the gal with Dior's new line sketched inside her bra. These spies received very little notice in the 20th century. Now, however, they are the only genuine items around. The tensions involved in interstellar commerce are enormous. Anything that will give you an edge, a new manufacturing process, a classified shipping schedule, may become as important as the Manhattan Project once was. If somebody has something like this and you want it, a real spy is worth his weight in meerschaum. Mike Shandon was a real spy, the best one I'd ever employed. I can never think of him without a certain twitch of envy. He was everything I once wished I could be. He was around 2 inches taller than me, and perhaps 25 pounds heavier. His eyes were the color of just polished mahogany, and his hair was black as ink. He was damnably graceful, had a sickeningly beautiful voice, and was always dressed to perfection. A farm boy from the breadbasket world, Wava, he'd had an itchy heel and expensive tastes. He'd educated himself while being rehabilitated after some antisocial acts. In my youth, you would have said he'd spent his free hours in the prison library while doing time for grand larceny. You don't say it that way anymore, but it amounts to the same thing. His rehabilitation was successful, if you judge it by the fact that it was a long time before he got caught again. Of course, he had a lot going for him. So much, in fact, that I was surprised he'd ever been tripped up, though he often said he was born to come in second. He was a telepath, and he had a damn near photographic memory. He was strong and tough and smart, and he could hold his liquor, and women fell all over him. So I think my certain twitch is not without foundation. He'd worked for me for several years before I'd actually met him. One of my recruiters had turned him up and sent him through Sandow Enterprises' Special Executive Training Group, spy school. A year later he emerged second in his class. Subsequent to that, he distinguished himself when it came to product research, as we call it. His name kept cropping up in classified reports, so one day I decided to have dinner with him. Sincerity and good manners, that's all I remembered afterwards. He was a born con-man. There are not too many human telepaths around, and telepathically obtained information is not admissible in court. Nevertheless, the ability is obviously valuable. Valuable as he might have been, however, Shandon was something of a problem. Whatever his earnings, he spent more. It was not until years after his death that I learned of his blackmail activities. The thing that tripped him up, actually, was his moonlighting. We knew there was a major security leak at SE. We didn't know how or where, and it took close to 5 years to find out. By then, Sandow Enterprises was beginning to totter. We nailed him. It wasn't easy, and it involved 4 other telepaths, but we cornered him and brought him to trial. I testified at great length, and he was convicted, sentenced, and shipped off for more rehabilitation. I undertook 3 worldscaping jobs then to keep SE functioning smoothly. We weathered the vicissitudes that followed, but not without a lot of trouble. One item of which was Shandon's escape from rehabilitative custody. This was several years later, but word of it spread fast. His trial had been somewhat sensational. So his name was added to the wanted lists, but the universe is a big place. It was near Coos Bay, Oregon, that I had taken a seaside place for my stay on Earth. 2 to 3 months had seemed in order, as I was there to watch over our merger with a couple North American companies. Dwelling beside a body of water is tonic for the weary psyche. Sea smells, sea birds, sea wrack, sands, alternately cool, warm, moist, and dry. A taste of brine in the presence of the rocking, slopping, blue-gray-green, spit-flecked waters has the effect of rinsing the emotions, bathing the outlook, bleaching the conscience. I walked beside it every morning before breakfast, and again in the evening before retiring. My name was Carlos Palermo, if anybody cared. After 6 weeks, the place had gotten me to feeling clean and healthy, and what with the mergers, my financial empire was finally coming back into balance. The place where I stayed was set in a small cove. The house, a white stucco building with red-tiled roof and an enclosed courtyard behind it, was right by the water. Set in the seaside wall was a black metal gate, and beyond this lay the beach. To the south, a high escarpment of gray shale. A tangled mass of bushes and trees ended the beach to the north. It was peaceful. I was peaceful. The night was cool. You could almost say chill. A big 3/4 moon was working its way down into the west and dripping light onto the water. The stars seemed exceptionally bright. Far out over the heaving bulk of the ocean, a cluster of 8 sea mine derricks blocked starlight. A floating island occasionally reflected moonbeams from off its slick surfaces. I didn't hear him coming. Apparently he had worked his way down through the brush to the north, waited till I was as near as I was going to be, approached as close as he could, and rushed me when I became aware of his presence. It is easier than you might think for one telepath to conceal himself from another, while remaining aware of the other's position and general activities. It is a matter of blocking, imagining a shield around yourself, and remaining as emotionally inert as possible. Admitted, this is rather difficult to do when you hate a man's guts and are stalking him for purposes of killing him. This probably is what saved my life. I cannot really say that I realized there was a vicious presence at my back. It was just that, as I took the night air and strolled along the line of the surf, I suddenly became apprehensive. Those nameless thoughts that sometimes run through the back of your head when you awaken for no apparent reason in the middle of a still, warm summer night, lie there a while wondering what the hell woke you up, and then hear an unusual sound in the next room, magnified by the quiet, electrified by your inexplicable resurrection into a sense of emergency and stomach-squeezing tension. Those thoughts raced in an instant, and my toes and fingertips, old anthropoid reflex, tingled, and the night seemed a shade darker, and the sea a home for possible terrors whose sucking tentacles mingled with the wave, even then heading toward me. Overhead, a line of brightness signified an upper atmosphere transport, which could any moment cease to function and descend like a meteor upon me. So when I heard the first quick crunch of sand behind me, the adrenaline was already there. I turned quickly, dropping into a crouch. My right foot skidded out behind me as I moved, and I fell to one knee. A blow to the side of my face sent me sprawling to my right. He was upon me then, and we grappled in the sand, rolling, wrestling for position. Crying out would have been a waste of breath, for there was nobody else around. I tried to scuff sand into his eyes. I tried to knee him in the groin and jab him in any of a dozen painful places. He had been well trained, however, and he outweighed me and seemed faster, too. Strange as it sounds, we fought for close to 5 minutes before I realized who he was. We were in the wet sand then, with the surf breaking about us, and he had already broken my nose with a forward smash of his head and snapped 2 of my fingers when I tried for a lock about his throat. The moonlight touched his moist face, and I saw that it was Shandon, and knew that I would have to kill him to stop him. A knockout would not be good enough. A prison or a hospital would only postpone another encounter. He had to die if I was to live. I imagine his reasoning was the same. Moments later, something hard and sharp jabbed me in the back, and I wriggled to the left. If a man decides he wants to kill me, I don't much care how I do it to him. Being first is the only thing that matters. As the surf splashed about my ears and Shandon pushed my head backwards into the water, I groped with my right hand and found glanced off the forearm he had raised in defense. Telepaths have a certain advantage in a fight, because they often know what the other fellow is planning to do next. But it is a terrible thing to know and not be able to do a thing about it. My second blow smashed into his left eye socket, and he must have seen his death coming, because he howled then like a dog, right before I pulped his temple. I hit him twice again for good measure, pushed him off and rolled away, the rock slipping from my fingers and splashing beside me. I lay there for a long while, blinking back at the stars, while the surf washed me and the body of my enemy rocked gently a few feet away. When I recovered, I searched him, and among other things I found a pistol. It carried a full charge and was in perfect operating condition. In other words, he'd wanted to kill me with his hands. He had estimated he was able to, and he had preferred risking injury in order to do it that way. He could have nailed me from the shadows, but he had had guts enough to follow the dictates of his hate. He could have been the most dangerous man I had ever faced, if he had used his brains. For this I respected him. If it had been the other way around, I would have done it the easy way. If the reasons for any violence in which I may indulge are emotional ones, I never let those feelings dictate the means. I reported the attack, and Shandon lay dead on earth. Somewhere in Dallas he had become a strip of tape you could hold in the palm of your hand, all that he ever was or hoped to be, weighing less than an ounce. After 30 days, that too would be gone. Weeks later, on the eve of my departure, I stood on the same spot, there on the other side of the big pond from Tokyo Bay, and I knew that once you go down in it, you do not come again. The reflected stars buckled and twisted like in warp drive, and though I did not know it at the time, somewhere a green man was laughing. He had gone fishing in the bay. "You stupid son of a bitch," I said. Chapter 6. To have it all to do over again annoyed me, but more than annoyance there was a certain fear. Shandon had slipped up, selling himself to his emotions once. He would not be likely to make the same mistake again. He was a tough, dangerous man, and now he apparently had a piece of something which made him even more dangerous. Also, he had to be aware of my presence on Illyria, after my sending to Green earlier in the evening. "You have complicated my problem," I said, "so you are going to help me resolve it." "I do not understand," Green said. "You baited a trap for me, and it has grown more teeth," I told him, "but the bait is just as much an inducement now as it was before. I'm going after it, and you're coming along." He laughed. "I am sorry, but my path leads in the opposite direction. I will not go back willingly, and I would be of no use to you as a prisoner. In fact, I would represent a distinct impediment." "I have 3 choices," I said. "I can kill you now, let you go your way, or allow you to accompany me. You may dismiss the first for the time being, as you are of no use to me dead. If you go your way, I will proceed as I began, on my own. If I obtain what I wish, I will return to Megape. There I will tell how you failed in your centuries-long plan of vengeance on an Earthman. I will tell how you dropped your plan and fled because another man of that same race had scared the hell out of you. If you wish then to take wives, you must seek them from among your people on other worlds, and even there the word may reach them eventually. None would call you Dra, despite your wealth. Megape would refuse your bones when you die. You will never again hear the ringing of the tidal bells, and know that they ring for you. May the blind things at the bottom of the great sea, whose bellies are circles of light, he said, recall with pleasure the flavor of your marrow. I blew a smoke ring. And if I should proceed as I began on my own, I said, and be slain myself in the coming encounter, do you think that you will escape from harm? Did you not look into the mind of Mike Shandon as you fought him? Did you not say that you hurt him? Do you not know that he is a man who will not forget such a thing? He is not so subtle as a paean. He does not consider it necessary to proceed with finesse. He will simply turn and seek you, and when he finds you, he will cut you down. So whether I win or lose, your end will be disgrace or death. If I elect to accompany you and assist you, what then? He asked. I will forget the vengeance which you sought upon me, I said. I will show you that there was no Pai Bhadra, no instrument of affront, so that you may take leave of this vengeance with honor. I will not seek recompense, and we may go our ways thereafter, each freed of the hooks of the other. No, he said. There was Pai Bhadra in your elevation to a name. I do not accept what you propose. I shrugged. Very well, I said. Then how does this sound? Since your feelings and intentions are known to me, it would be useless for either of us to plot vengeance along classical lines. That fine, final moment, where the enemy realizes the instrument, the mover, and the Pai Bhadra, and knows then that his entire life has been but a preface to this irony, that moment would be diminished, if not destroyed. So let me offer you satisfaction rather than forgiveness, I went on. Assist me, and I will give you a fair opportunity to destroy me afterwards. I, of course, will require an equal chance to destroy you. What do you say to that? What means did you have in mind? None at the moment. Anything that is mutually agreeable will do. What assurance may I have of this? I swear it by the name that I bear. He turned away and was silent for a time. Then, I agree to your terms, he said. I will accompany you and assist you. Then let us move back to my campsite and become more comfortable, I said. There are things you have hinted at which I must know more fully. I turned my back upon him and then walked away. I knocked down the tent and spread the flimsy then for us to sit upon. I rekindled the campfire. The ground shook very slightly before we seated ourselves upon it. "Did you do that?" I asked him, gesturing toward the northwest. "Partly," he replied. "Why, trying to frighten me?" "Not you." "And Shandon wasn't scared either?" "Far from it." "Supposing you tell me precisely what has happened." "First, concerning our agreement," he said, "a counter-proposal has just occurred to me, one in which you will be interested." "What is it?" "You are going there to rescue your friends," he gestured. "Supposing it were possible to recover them without peril. Supposing Mike Shandon could be avoided completely. Would you not prefer to do it that way, or do you require his blood immediately?" I sat there and thought about it. If I let him live, he would come after me again, sooner or later. On the other hand, if I could get what I wanted now without having to face him, I could find 1,000 safe ways of taking him out of the game afterwards. Still, I'd come to Illyria ready to face a deadly man. What difference did it make if the names and faces were changed? Still, let's hear your proposal. "The people you seek," he said, "are there only because I recalled them. You know how I did it. I used the tapes. These tapes are intact, and only I know where they are located. I told you how I obtained them. That which I did before I can do now. I can transport the tapes here immediately if you so bid me. Then we can depart this place, and you can recall your people as you would. Once we are aloft in your vessel, I can show you where to burn or bomb to destroy Mike Shandon without danger to ourselves. Is this not simpler and safer? We can settle our own differences later by agreement." "There are 2 holes in it," I said. "1, there will be no tape for Ruth Laris. 2, I would be abandoning the others. Whether I can recall them again is unimportant if I leave them behind me now. The analogues you recall will have no memory of this." "That is not the point. They exist right now. They're as real as you or I. It does not matter that they can be duplicated. They're on the Isle of the Dead, aren't they? Yes. Then if I were to destroy it to get Shandon, I'd get everybody, wouldn't I? That would necessarily follow, but I veto your proposal. That is your privilege. Have you any other suggestions? No. Good. Now that you've exhausted everything you have to change the subject, tell me what happened between you and Shandon back there. He bears a name. What? The shadow of Bilion stands behind him. That's impossible. It doesn't work that way. He's no worldscaper. Bide a moment, Frank, for I know it requires explanation. Apparently there are some things Dra Marling never saw fit to tell you. He was a revisionist, however, so it is understandable. You know, he continued, that being a name-bearer is not essential for the design and construction of worlds. Of course it is. It is a necessary psychological device to release unconscious potentials which are required to perform certain phases of the work. One has to be able to feel like a god to act like one. Then why can I do the work? I never heard of you before you became my enemy. I've never seen any of your work save that which stands about me, here, grafted onto my own. If it is representative, then I would say that you can't do the work. You're a lousy craftsman. As you would have it, he said. Nevertheless, it is obvious that I can manipulate the necessary processes. Anybody can learn to do that. You are talking about creative design, of which I see no indication on your part. I was talking about the pantheon of Strantry. It existed before there were worldscapers, you know. I know. What of it? Revisionists, like Dra Marling and his predecessors, used the old religion in their trade. They did not take it for its own sake, but, as you say, as a psychological device. Your confirmation as the Shrugger of Thunders was merely a means of coordinating your subconscious. To a fundamentalist, this is blasphemous. You are a fundamentalist. Yes. Then why did you apprentice yourself to what you consider a sinful trade? In order to be confirmed with a name. I'm afraid you've lost me. It was the name that I wanted, not the trade. My reasons were religious, not economic. But if it is only a psychological device, that is the point. It is not. It is an authentic ceremony, and its results, personal contact with the god, are genuine. It is the ordination rite for the high priests of Strantry. Then why didn't you take holy orders rather than world engineering? Because only a name may administer the rite, and the 27 names who live are all revisionists. They would not administer the rite for the old reasons. 26, I said. 26? Dra Marling is under the mountain, and Lormel of the Many Hands dwells in the Happy Nothing. He lowered his head and was silent for a time. Then, one less, he said. I can remember when there were 43. It is sad. Yes. Why did you want a name? In order to be a priest, not a worldscaper, but the revisionists would not have one like me among them. They let me finish the training, then rejected me. Then, to insult me further, the next man they confirmed was an alien. I see. That is why you marked me for vengeance? Yes. I was hardly responsible, you know. In fact, this is the first time I've heard the story. I had always thought that denominational differences meant very little within Strantry. Now you know better. You also must understand that I bear you no personal malice. By avenging myself on you, I strike back at those who blaspheme. Why do you indulge in what worldscaping you do if you consider it immoral? Worldscaping is not immoral. It is the subjugation of the true religion to this end that I find objectionable. I do not bear a name in the orthodox sense of the term, and the work pays me well, so why should I not do it? No reason I can think of, I told him, if someone's willing to pay you to try. But what then is your connection with Bilion, and Bilion with Mike Shandon? Sin and retribution, I suppose. I undertook the confirmation rite myself one night, in the temple at Prilbay. You know how it is when the sacrifice is made, and the words are spoken, and you move along the outer wall of the temple, paying homage to each of the gods. How one tablet lights up before you, and you feel the power come into you. That is the name you will bear? Yes. It happened to me at the station of Bilion. So you confirmed yourself? He confirmed me in his own name. I did not want it to be him, for he is a destroyer, not a creator. I had hoped that Kirwar of the Four Faces, father of flowers, would come to me. Each must abide by his disposition. That is true, but I had gotten mine wrongly. Bilion would move me even when I did not summon him. I do not know but that he may even have moved me in my vengeance design for you, because you bear the name of his ancient enemy. I can feel my thinking changing even now as I speak of these things. Yes, it may be possible. Since he left me, things have been so different. How could he leave you? The disposition is for life. But the nature of my confirmation may not have bound him to me. He is gone now. Shandon. Yes, he is one of the rare ones among your people who can communicate without words, such as yourself. I was not always so. The power grew in me slowly as I studied with Marling. When I recalled him to life, the first thing that I saw in his mind was the anguish of his passing by your hand. But then quickly, very quickly, he cast this off and became oriented. His mental processes intrigued me, and I favored him above the others, some of whom had to be maintained as prisoners. I talked with him often and taught him many things. He came to assist me in the preparations for your visit. How long has he been around? About a splanth, he said. A splanth is around 8.5 Earth months. I called them all back at approximately the same time. Why did you kidnap Ruth Laris? I thought that perhaps you did not believe your dead had been recalled. There followed no massive search on your part after I began sending the pictures. It would have been enjoyable had you searched for a long while to find that this was the place. Since you did not respond, I decided to become more obvious. I kidnapped one of various people who meant something to you. Had you not responded after that, when I even took the trouble of leaving you a message, then I would have taken another, and another, until you saw fit to come looking. So Shandon became your protege. You trusted him. Of course. He was a very willing pupil and assistant. He is intelligent and possesses a pleasing manner. It was pleasant having him about. Until recently. Yes. It is unfortunate that I misread his interest and cooperativeness. Quite naturally, he shared my desire for vengeance upon you. So, of course, did your other enemies, but they were not so clever, and none of them telepaths. I enjoyed having someone here with whom I could communicate directly. What then caused the falling out between two such fine friends? When it happened yesterday, it seemed that it was the matter of the vengeance. Actually, though, it was the power. He was more devious than I had allowed for. He tricked me. In what fashion? He said that he wanted more than your death as we had planned it. He said that he wanted personal vengeance, that he wanted to kill you himself. We argued over this. Finally, he refused to follow my orders, and I threatened to discipline him. He was silent for a moment, then continued. He struck me then. He hit me with his hands. As I defended myself, the fury grew in me, and I decided to hurt him badly before I destroyed him. I called upon the name that I had taken, and Bilion heard and came to me. I reached a power pull, and standing in the shadow of Bilion, I burst the ground at our feet and called up the vapors and flames that dwell at the heart of the world. This was how I almost slew him, for he tottered for a moment on the brink of the abyss. I scolded him badly then, but he recovered his balance. He had achieved his intention. He had forced me to summon Bilion. What end did this serve? He knew my story, even as I have told it to you. He knew how I had obtained the name, and he had a plan concerning it which he had been able to conceal from me. Had I known of it, however, I would have been amused, nothing more. When I saw what he was attempting, I laughed. I, too, believed that such things could not be. But I was mistaken. He made a pact with Bilion. He had aroused me to anger and placed my life in jeopardy, knowing I would summon Bilion if these things occurred and I was given sufficient time. He fought poorly to give me that time. Then, when the shadow came over me and I stood as one apart, he reached out with his mind, and there was communion. In this fashion did he gamble with his life for power. He said, had he spoken with words, "Look upon me. Am I not a superior vessel to he whom you have chosen? Come, number the ways of my mind and the powers of my body. When you have done this thing, you may choose to forsake the pain and walk with me all the days of my life. I invite you. I am better suited than any man alive to serve your ends, which I take to be fire and destruction. This one who stands before me is weak, and would have consorted with the father of flowers had he been given a choice. Come over to me, and we both shall profit by the association." Here he paused again. "And?" I said. Suddenly I was alone. Somewhere a bird croaked. The night manufactured moisture and began to paint the world with it. Soon a light would begin in the east, fade away, come again. I stared into the fire and saw no faces. "Seems to shoot hell out of the autonomous complex theory," I said. "But I have heard of transferred psychoses among telepaths. It could be something like that." "No. Belian and I were bound by confirmation. He found a better agent, and he left me." "I am not convinced that he is an entity in his own right." "You, a name-bearer, do not believe? You give me cause to dislike you. Don't go looking for new Pi Bhadra, huh? Look where your last one got you. I only said that I'm not wholly convinced. I don't know. What happened after Shandon made his pact with Belian?" He turned slowly from the fissure which had opened between us. He turned his back on me, as if I no longer existed. I reached out with my mind to touch him, and Belian was there. He raised his arms, and the entire isle began to tremble. I turned and fled then. I took the boat from its mooring and headed for the shore. After a time the waters boiled about me. Then the eruptions began. I made it across to the shore, and when I looked back the volcano was already rising from the lake. I could see Shandon on the isle, his arms still upraised, the smoke and the sparks coloring the air about him. I went then in search of you. After a time I received your message." "Was he able to use the power pulls before this thing happened?" "No. He could not even detect their presence." "What of the others who have been recalled?" "They are all of them on the isle. Several of them are drugged to keep them tranquil." "I see." "Perhaps you will now change your mind and do as I suggested." "No." We sat there until light came into the world about 15 minutes later. The fog was beginning to lift, but the sky was still overcast. The sun set clouds on fire. The wind came cool. I thought of my ex-spy playing with his volcano and communing with Belian. Now was the time to hit him while he was still intoxicated with his new strengths. I'd have liked to draw him away from the isle into some section of Illyria green had not corrupted, where everything that lived would be my ally. He would not respond to anything that obvious, though. I wanted to get him away from the others, if possible, but I could not figure a way to accomplish it. "How long did it take you to crap this place up?" I asked. "I began altering this section about 30 years ago," he said. I shook my head, stood and kicked dirt into the fire until I'd smothered it. "Come on, we'd better get moving." Ginnunga Gap, according to the Norsemen, existed in the center of all space in the morning of time, shrouded with perpetual twilight. Its northern rim was ice, and its southern was flame. Over the ages these forces fought, and the rivers flowed, and life stirred within the abyss. Sumerian myth has it that Enki did battle with and subdued Tiamat, the dragon of the sea, thus separating the earth and the waters. Enki himself, though, was sort of like fire. The Aztecs held that the first men were made of stone, and that a fiery sky portended a new age. And there are many stories of how a world may end. Judgment Day, Götterdämmerung, the fusion of atoms. For me, I have seen worlds and people begin and end, actually and metaphorically, and it will always be the same. It's always fire and water. No matter what your scientific background, emotionally you're an alchemist. You live in a world of liquids, solids, gases, and heat transfer effects that accompany their changes of state. These are the things you perceive, the things you feel. Whatever you know about their true natures is grafted on top of that. So when it comes to the day-to-day sensations of living, from mixing a cup of coffee to flying a kite, you treat with the 4 ideal elements of the old philosophers: earth, air, fire, water. Let's face it, air isn't very glamorous, no matter how you look at it. I mean, I'd hate to be without it, but it's invisible, and so long as it behaves itself, it can be taken for granted and pretty much ignored. The trouble with Earth is that it endures. Solid objects tend to persist with a monotonous regularity. Not so fire and water, however. They're formless, colorful, and they're always doing something. While suggesting you repent, prophets very seldom predict the wrath of the gods in terms of landslides and hurricanes. No. Floods and fires are what you get for the rottenness of your ways. Primitive man was really on his way when he learned to kindle the one and had enough of the other nearby to put it out. Is it coincidence that we've filled hells with fires and oceans with monsters? I don't think so. Both principles are mobile, which is generally a sign of life. Both are mysterious and possess the power to hurt or kill. It is no wonder that intelligent creatures the universe over have reacted to them in a similar fashion. It is the alchemical response. Kathy and I had been that way. It had been a stormy, mobile, mysterious thing, full of the power to hurt, to give birth, and to give death. She had been my secretary for almost 2 years before our marriage, a small, dark girl with pretty hands who looked well in bright colors and liked to feed crumbs to the birds. I had hired her through an agency on the world Mail. In my youth, people were happy to hire an intelligent girl who could type, file, and take shorthand. What with the progressive debasement of the academic machine and the upward creep of paper requirements in an expanding competitive labor market, however, I'd hired her on advice of my personnel office, on learning she held a doctorate in secretarial science from the Institute of Mail. God, that first year was bad. She automated everything, screwed up my personal filing system, and set me 6 months behind on correspondence. After I had a 20th century typewriter reconstructed at considerable expense, and she learned to operate it, I taught her shorthand, and she became as good as a 20th century high school graduate with a business major. Business returned to normal, and I think we were the only 2 people around who could read Greg's scribbles, which was nice for confidential matters, and gave us something in common. Her a bright little flame, and me a wet blanket. I'd reduced her to tears many times that first year. Then she became indispensable, and I realized it was not just because she was a good secretary. We were married, and there were 6 happy years, 6.5 actually. She died in the fire in the Miami Star Dock disaster, on her way to meet me for a conference. We'd had 2 sons, and one of them is still living. On and off, before and since, the fires have stalked me through the years. Water has been my friend. While I feel closer to the water than the fire, my worlds are born of both. Cocytus, New Indiana, St. Martin, Boonengrad, Mercy, Illyria, and all the others came into being through a process of burning, washing, steaming, and cooling. Now I walked through the woods of Illyria, a world I'd built as a park, a resort. I walked through the woods of an Illyria purchased by the enemy, who walked by my side, emptied of the people for whom I had created it, the happy ones, the vacationers, the resters, the people who still believed in trees and lakes and mountains with pathways among them. They were gone, and the trees among which I walked were twisted, the lake toward which I headed was polluted, the land had been wounded, and the fire, her blood, spurted from the mountain that loomed before, waiting, as the fire always is, waiting for me. Overhead hung the clouds, and between their matted whiteness and my dirty blackness flew the soot the fire sent, an infinite migration of funeral notices. Kathy would have liked Illyria had she seen it in another time and another place. The thought of her in this time and this place, with Shandon running the show, sickened me. I cursed softly as I walked along, and those are my thoughts on alchemy. We walked for about an hour, and Green began complaining about his shoulder and fatigue in general. I told him he could have my sympathy, so long as he kept walking. This must have satisfied him, because it shut him up. An hour after that, I did let him take a break while I climbed a tree to check out the forward terrain. We were getting close, and it was about to become a steady downhill hike the rest of the way in. The day had lightened as much as it was going to, and the fog had vanished almost entirely. It was already warmer than it had been at any time since my landing. The perspiration rolled down my sides as I climbed, and the flaky bark bit into my hands, which had grown soft in recent years. With each branch that I disturbed, a fresh cloud of dust and ashes appeared. I sneezed several times, and my eyes burned and watered. I could see the top of the aisle above the fringe of distant trees. To To the left of it, and somewhat back, I could see the smoldering top of a fresh-grown cone of volcanic rock. I cursed again, because I felt like it, and climbed back down. It took us about 2 more hours to reach the shore of Acheron. Reflected in the oily surface of my lake were the fires, and nothing more. Lava and hot rocks spit and hissed as they struck the water. I felt dirty and sticky and hot as I looked out across what remained of my handiwork. Small waves left lines of scum and black crud upon the shore. The water was spotted with clouds of such stuff heading in towards the beach. Fishes rocked belly up in the shallows, and the air smelled like rotten eggs. I sat upon a rock and regarded it, smoking a cigarette the while. A mile out stood my Isle of the Dead, still unchanged, stark and ominous as a shadow with nothing to cast it. I leaned forward and tested the water with my finger. The lake was hot, quite hot. Far out and to the east there was a second light. It seemed as if a smaller cone were growing there. "I came to shore about a 1/4 mile to the west of here," said Green. I nodded and continued to stare. It was still morning, and I felt like contemplating the prospect. The southern face of the isle, the one I looked upon, had a narrow strip of beach following the curve of a cove perhaps 200 feet across. From there a natural-seeming trail zigzagged upwards, reaching various levels and ultimately the high, horned peaks. "Where do you think he is?" I asked. "About 2/3 of the way up on this side," said Green, "in the chalet. That is where I had my laboratory. I expanded many of the caves behind it." A frontal approach was almost mandatory, as the other faces of the isle possessed no beaches and rose sharply from the water. Almost, but not quite. I doubted that Green, Shandon, or anybody else was aware that the northern face could be climbed. I had designed it to look unscalable, but it was not all that bad. I had done it just because I like everything to have a back door, as well as a front door. If I were to employ that route, it would require my ascending all the way and coming down toward the chalet from above. I decided I would do it that way. I also decided that I would keep it to myself until the last minute. After all, Green was a telepath, and for all I knew, the story he'd given me could be a line of rook manure. He and Shandon could be working together, and for that matter, there might not even be a Shandon. I wouldn't have trusted him worth a plug nickel back when they still had nickels to plug. "Come on," I said, rising and flipping my cigarette into the cesspool in my lake. "Show me where you left the boat." So we made our way to the left along the shoreline, to the place where he remembered beaching the thing. Only it was not there. "Are you sure this is the place?" "Yes." "Well, where is it?" "Perhaps it was loosened by one of the shocks and drifted away." "Could you swim as far as the isle, bad shoulder and all?" "I am a Payan," he replied, which meant he could damn well swim the English Channel with 2 bum shoulders, then turn around and go back again. I'd only said it to irritate him. "But we won't be able to swim to the isle," he added. "Why not?" "There are hot currents from the volcano. They are worse farther out." "Then we are going to build a raft," I said. "I'll cut the wood with my pistol, while you locate something suitable for binding it together." "Such as?" he inquired. "You're the one who screwed up this forest," I told him, "so you know it better than I do now. I've seen some tough-looking vines, though." "They are somewhat abrasive," he said. "I will need your knife." I hesitated a moment. "All right. Here." "Waters can come over the edge of a raft. They may be very warm." "Then the waters must be cooled." "How?" "Soon it will begin to rain." "The volcanoes—" "There won't be that much water." He shrugged, nodded, and went off to cut vines. I felled and stripped trees, perhaps 6 inches in diameter, 10 feet in length, paying as much attention as possible to my back. Soon it began to rain. For the next several hours a steady, cold drizzle descended from the heavens, drenching us to the skin, poking holes in Acheron, washing some of the filth from the shrubbery. I shaped 2 broad paddles and cut us a pair of long poles while I waited for Green to harvest sufficient cordage to bind things. While I was still waiting, the ground heaved violently, and a terrific eruption split the near side of the cone halfway up. A river the color of sunsets poured from the gap. My ears rang for minutes after the explosion. Then the surface of the lake picked itself up and rushed toward me, a baby tidal wave. I ran like hell and climbed the highest tree in sight. The water reached the base of the tree, but did not get much higher than a foot. There were 3 such waves in 20 minutes. Then the waters began to recede, trading me a lot of mud for the timber I'd cut, plus both oars. I grew angry. I knew my rain could not put out his bloody volcano, might even exacerbate things a bit. But I was mad as hell seeing all that work washed away. I began to speak the words. From somewhere I heard the paean calling. I ignored him. After all, I wasn't exactly Francis Sandow at that point. I dropped to the ground and felt the tug of a powerful from several hundred yards to my left. I moved in that direction, climbing a small rise to reach its nexus. From that point I had a clear line of vision across the bothered waters out to the isle itself. Perhaps my visual acuity had increased. I saw the chalet quite clearly. I fancied that I also detected a movement of sorts at the place where the rail guarded the end of the courtyard that overlooked the waters. Human eyes are not as acute as a paean's. Green had said he'd seen Shandon clearly after crossing over the waters. I felt her pulse as I stood there above one of Valeria's larger veins or smaller arteries, and the power came into me, and I sent it upward. Soon the drizzle became a heavy downpour, and when I lowered my upraised hand, the lightning flashed and the thunders skated round and round in the tin drum of the sky. A wind, sudden as a springing cat and cold as the Arctic's halations, struck me in the back and shaved my cheeks as it passed. Green cried out again, from somewhere off to my right, I think. Then the heavens began to sizzle, and they sent down rain so heavily that the chalet vanished from sight and the isle itself faded to a gray outline. The volcano was the faintest of sparks above the water. Soon the wind raced by like a freight train, and its howling joined with the thunders to create a perpetual din. The shores of Acheron lengthened, and the waters were buffeted until they moved, in waves like the ones we had received, back in that direction from which they had come. If Green called out again, I could not hear him. The water ran in rivers through my hair, down my face and neck, but I did not need my eyes to see. The power enfolded me, and the temperature plummeted. The rain came in sheets that cracked like whips now. The day grew dark as night. I laughed, and the waters rose up in spouts and swayed like genies, and the lightnings ran their gauntlets again and again, but the machine never said tilt. "Stop it, Frank! He will know you are here," came the thoughts, addressed to that part of me which Green wished to address. "He does already, doesn't he?" I might have replied. "Take cover till this is over. Wait." And as the waters came down and the winds went forth, the ground began to rock beneath me once again. The spark that hovered before me grew and glowed like a buried sun. Then the lightnings walked about it. They tickled the top of the isle. They wrote names upon the chaos, and one of them was mine. I was thrown to my knees by another shock, but I stood again and raised both arms. And then I stood in a place that was neither solid, liquid, nor gaseous. There was no light, nor was there darkness. It was neither hot nor cold. Perhaps it lay within my own mind, and perhaps not. We stared at one another, and in my pale green hands I held a thunderbolt at port arms. He was built like a wide gray pillar, was covered with scales. He'd a snout like a crocodile, and his eyes were fiery. His 3 pairs of arms assumed various attitudes as we spoke. Otherwise he also did not move from where he stood. "Old enemy, old comrade," he addressed me. "Yes, Belian, I am here." "Your cycle has ended. Save yourself the ignominy of ruin at my hands. Withdraw now, Shimbo, and preserve a world you made." "I doubt the world shall be lost, Belian." Silence. Then there must be a confrontation. Unless you yourself choose to withdraw. I will not. Then there will be a confrontation. He sighed a flame. So be it. And he was gone. And I stood atop the small hill and lowered my arms slowly, for the power had gone out of me. It was a strange experience, unlike anything I had known before. A waking dream, if you would, a fantasy born of tension and anger, if you wouldn't. The rain was still descending, though not with its previous force. The winds had lost something of their intensity. The lightnings had ceased, as had the trembling of the ground. The fiery activity had diminished, shrinking the orange nest atop the cone, stopping the wound in its side. I stared at all this, feeling once again the wetness and the coldness and the firmness of the ground beneath my feet. Our long-distance battle had been cut short, our powers cancelled. This was fine with me, though. The waters looked cooler and the slick gray isle less forbidding. Ha! In fact, as I watched, the sun broke through the clouds for a moment, and a rainbow unrolled itself amidst sparkling droplets, arcing through the air now clean and framing Acheron, the isle, the smouldering cone like a picture within a gleaming paperweight, miniature, contained and more than slightly unreal. I departed the hillock and returned to the place I had left. There was a raft that needed building. Chapter 7. As I lamented my missing cowardice, it had been such a life-saving virtue in the past, it responded by rushing back and leaving me scared as hell once again. I had lived far too long, and with every day that passed the odds kept growing against my lasting much longer. Although they didn't put it quite that way when giving the sales pitch, my insurance company's attitude is reflected in the size of the premiums involved. Their computer classified me along with terminal xenopath cases, according to their rates and my spies. Comforting. Probably right, too. This was the first piece of dangerous business I had been out on in a long while. I felt out of practice, though I was not sorry I had skimped. If Green noticed that my hands were shaking, he made no comment. They held his life, and he felt badly enough about this as it was. He was in a position now to kill me any time he wanted, if you stopped to think about it very carefully. He knew it. I knew it. And he knew I knew it. And the only thing that was holding him back was the fact that he needed me to get him off of Illyria, which logically meant that his ship was on the Isle, which by extension meant that if Shandon had a ship at his disposal, he could come looking for us by air, despite our hallucinatory companion's feelings with respect to a confrontation, which meant that we would be better off working under the trees than on the beach, and that our voyage required the cover of night. Accordingly, I moved our project inland. Green thought this a very good idea. The cloud cover cracked that afternoon as we assembled the raft, but it did not break completely. The rain continued, the day grew a bit brighter, and the two white moons passed overhead, Cottontalis and Flopsis, lacking only grins and eye sockets. Later in the day, a silver insect, 3 times the size of the Model T and ugly as a grub, left the isle and circled the lake 6 times, spiraling outward, then inward. We were under a lot of foliage, burrowed our ways beneath more, stayed there until it returned to the isle. I clutched my ancient artifact the while. The bunny did not sell me out. We finished the raft a couple hours before sundown and spent the balance of the day with our backs against the boles of adjacent trees. "A penny for your thoughts," I said. "What is a penny?" "An ancient monetary unit, once common on my home planet. On second thought, don't take me up on it. They're valuable now." It is strange to offer to buy a thought. Was this a common practice among your people in the old days? It had to do with the rise of the merchant classes, I said. Everything has a price and all that. That is a very interesting concept, and I can see how one such as yourself could well believe in it. Would you buy a paibhadra? That would be barratry. A paibhadra is a cause for an action. But would you pay a person to abandon his vengeance against you? No. Why not? You would take my money and still seek the vengeance, hoping to lull me into a sense of false security. I was not speaking of myself. You know that I am wealthy, and that a pagan does not abandon his vengeance for any reason. No, I was thinking of Mike Shandon. He is of your race, and may also believe that everything has a price. As I recall it, he incurred your disfavor in the first place because he needed money, and did things that offended you in order to obtain it. Now he hates you because you sent him to prison, and then killed him. But since he is of your race, which places a monetary value upon all things, perhaps you might pay him sufficient money for his Paibhadra, so that he will be satisfied and go away. Buy our way out? The thought hadn't occurred to me. I had come to Illyria ready to fight with the Payan menace. Now I held him in my hand, and he was no longer a menace. An Earthman had replaced him as my #1 enemy of the moment, and there was a possibility that this assessment was correct. We are a venal lot, not necessarily more so than all of the other races, but certainly more than some. It had been Shandon's expensive tastes that had gotten him into a bind in the first place. Things had happened quickly since my arrival on Illyria, and strangely enough, for me and my tree, it had not occurred to me that my money might be my salvation. On the other hand, considering Shandon's record as a spender, a thing brought out at the first trial and at the appellate level, he went through money like a beta splendens through that most liquid of all alchemical elements. Say I gave him a $500,000 in universal credit drafts. Anybody else could invest it and live on the dividends. He would go through it in a couple of years. Then I would have problems again. He would have hit me this once, and he would figure he could do it again. And of course I could come through again. I could come through any time. So maybe he would not want to kill his golden goose. But then again, I'd never know for sure. I could not live with that. Still, if he were agreeable, I could buy him off now. Then I could arrange for a team of professional assassins to take him out of the game as soon as possible. But if they should fail, then he would be on my tail immediately, and it would be him or me again. I turned it over, looked at it from every possible angle. Ultimately, it boiled down to one thing. He'd had a gun with him, but he'd tried to kill me with his hands. It won't work with Shandon, I said. He's not a member of the merchant class. Oh, I meant no offense. I still do not quite understand how these things work with Earthmen. You're not alone in that. I watched the day fade away and the clouds zip themselves together once again. Soon it would be time to carry the raft to the shore and make our ways across the now temperate waters. There would be no moonlight to assist us. Green, I said, in you I see myself, as perhaps I have become more Payan than Earthman. I do not think this is the real reason, however, for everything that I am now is but an extension of something that was already within me. I, too, can kill as you would kill and hold with my Paibhadra come hell or high water. I know that, he said, and I respect you for it. What I am trying to say is that when this thing is over, if we should both live through it, I might welcome you as a friend. I might intercede for you with the other names, that you have another chance at confirmation. I might like to see a high priest of Struntry in the name of Kirwar of the Four Faces, Father of Flowers, should he be willing. You are trying to find my price now, Earthman. No, I am making a legitimate offer. Take it as you would. As yet, you have given me no Paibhadra. By trying to kill you? Under false Paibhadra. This does not bother me. You know that I may slay you whenever I wish. I know that you think so. I had thought this thing better shielded. It is a matter of deduction, not telepathy. You are much like a Payan, he said after a moment. I promise you that I will withhold my vengeance until after we have dealt with Shandon. Soon, I said. Soon we shall depart. And we sat there and waited for the night to fall. After a time it did. Now, I said. Now. And we stood and raised the raft between us. We carried it down to the water's edge, waded out into the warm shallows, set it adrifting. Got your paddle? Yes. Let's go. We climbed aboard, stabilized the thing, began paddling, then poling. "If he was above bribery," he said, "why did he sell your secrets?" "He would have sold the others out," I said, "had my people paid him more." "Then why is he above bribery?" "Because he is of my race and he hates me, nothing more. There is no buying that kind of Paibhadra." I thought then that I was right. "There are always dark areas within the minds of Earthmen," he observed. "One day I would like to know what is there." "Me too." A moon came up then, because a generalized blob of light appeared behind the clouds. It drifted slowly towards mid-heaven. The water splashed gently beside us, and little wavelets of it struck against our knees, our boots. A cool breeze followed us from the shore. "The volcano is at rest," he said. "What did you discuss with Bilian?" "You don't miss a trick, do you?" "I tried to contact you several times, and I know what I found." "Bilian and Shimbo are waiting," I said. "There will be quick movements, and one of them will be satisfied." The water was black as ink and warm as blood. The isle was a mountain of coal against the pearl and starless night. We poled until we lost the bottom, then commenced paddling, silently, twisting the oars. Green had a paean's love of the water in him. I could feel it in the way that he moved, in the ragtails of emotion that I picked up as we proceeded. To cross over the dark waters, it was an eerie feeling because of what the place meant to me, because of the chord it had struck within me while I was building it. The feeling of the valley of shadows, the sense of the serene passing, this was absent. This place was the butcher's block at the end of the run. I hated it and I feared it. I knew that I lacked the spiritual stamina to ever duplicate it. It was one of those once-in-a-lifetime creations that made me wish I hadn't. To cross over the dark waters meant to me a confrontation with something within myself that I did not understand or accept. I was cruising along on Tokyo Bay, and suddenly this was the answer, looming, the heaped remains of everything that goes down and does not come up again to shore, life's giant kitchen midden, the rubbish heap that remains after all things pass, the place that stands in testament to the futility of all ideals and intentions, good or bad, the rock that smashes values, there, signalizing the ultimate uselessness of life itself, which must one day be broken upon it, not to rise, never, no, not ever again. The warm water splashed about my knees, but a chill shook me and I broke rhythm. Green touched my shoulder, and we matched our paddling once again. "Why did you make it if you hate it so?" he asked me. "They paid me well," I replied, and, bear to the left, we're going in the back way. Our course altered, shifting westward, as he strengthened his strokes and I lightened mine. "The back way?" he repeated. "Yes," I said, and I did not elaborate. As we neared the isle, I ceased my reflections and became a mechanical thing, as I always do when there are too many thoughts to think. I paddled, and we slipped through the night, and soon the isle lay to starboard, mysterious lights flecking its face. From ahead, the light that glowed atop the cone crossed our path, dappling the waters, casting a faint red glow upon the cliffs. We passed the isle, then, and moved toward it from the north. Through the night I saw the northern face as in daylight. Memory mapped its scars and ridges, and my fingertips tingled with the texture of its stone. We drew near, and I touched the sheer, black face with my oar. We held that position while I stared upward, then said, "East." Several hundred yards later we came to the place where I had hidden the trail. A cleft slanted within the rock, 40 feet of chimney, where the pressure of back and feet allowed ascent to a narrow ledge, along which a man might edge his way for 60 feet, to encounter a series of hand and footholds leading up. I told this to Green, and he stabilized the raft while I went on ahead. Then he followed, uncomplaining, though his shoulder must have been bothering him. When I reached the top of the chimney, I looked down and was unable to spot the raft. I mentioned this, and Green grunted. I waited until he made it to the top, and helped him out of the cleft. Then we began inching our way along the cleft eastward. It took us about 15 minutes to reach the upward trail. Again I went first, after explaining that we had a 500-foot climb before we reached another ledge. The Payan grunted again and followed me. Soon my arms were sore, and when we made the ledge I sprawled and lit a cigarette. After 10 minutes we moved again. By midnight we had made it to the top without mishap. We walked for about 10 minutes. Then we saw him. He was a wandering figure, doubtless narcotized up to the ears. Maybe not, though. You can never be too sure. So I approached him, placed my hand upon his shoulder, stood before him, said, "Kurkur, how have you been?" He looked up at me through heavy-lidded eyes. He weighed about 350 pounds, wore white garments, Green's idea, I guess, was blue-eyed, light-complexioned, and soft-spoken. He lisped a bit when he answered me. "I think I have all the data," he said. "Good," I answered. "You know that I came here to meet this man, Green, in a combat of sorts. We have become allies recently, against Mike Shandon." "Give me a moment," he replied. Then, "Yes," he said, "you lose." "What do you mean?" "Shandon kills you in 3 hours and 10 minutes. "No," I said, "he can't." "If he does not," he replied, "it will be because you have slain him. Then Mr. Green will kill you about 5 hours and 20 minutes from now." "What makes you so sure?" "Green is the world-scaper who did Corlin?" "Are you?" I asked. "Yes." "Then he will kill you." "How?" "Probably by means of a blunt instrument," he said. "If you can avoid that, you might be able to take him with your hands. You've always proven just a bit stronger than you look, and it fools people. I do not think it will help you this time, though." "Thanks," I said. "Don't lose any sleep." "Unless you are both carrying secret weapons," he said, "and it is possible that you are." "Where is Shandon?" "In the chalet." "I want his head. How do I get it?" "You are a kind of demon factor. You have that ability which I cannot fully measure." "Yes, I know." "Do not use it." "Why?" "He has one too." "I know that also." "If you can kill him at all, you kill him without it." "Okay." "You do not trust me." "I don't trust anybody." "Do you remember the night you hired me?" "Faintly." "It was the best meal I ever had in my life. Pork chops. Lots of them." "It comes back to me." "You told me of Shimbo then. Invoke him, and Shandon will invoke the other one. Too many variables. It may be fatal." "Maybe Shandon has gotten to you." "No, I am just measuring probabilities." "Could Jarl the Omnipotent create a stone he could not lift?" Green asked him. "No," said Kurkur. "Why not?" "He would not." "That is no answer." "Yes, it is. Think about it. Would you?" "I do not trust him," said Green. "He was normal when I brought him back, but I believe that perhaps Shandon has reached him." "No," said Kurkur. "I am trying to help you." "By telling Sandow he is going to die?" "Well, he is." Green raised his hand, and suddenly he was holding my gun, which he must have teleported from my belt, in the same fashion as he had obtained the tapes. He fired twice, and handed it back to me. "Why did you do that?" "He was lying to you, trying to confuse you, trying to destroy your confidence." He was once a close associate of mine. He had trained himself to think like a computer. I think he was trying to be objective. "Get the tape, and you can resurrect him." "Come on, I've got 2 hours and 58 minutes. We walked away. "Should I not have done that?" he asked me after a time. "No. I am sorry." "Great. Don't kill anybody unless I ask you to, huh?" "All right." You have killed many people, have you not, Frank? Yes. Why? Them or me, and I'd rather it was them. So? You didn't have to kill Bacchus. I thought... Shut up. Just shut up. We walked on, passing through a cleft of rock. Tendrils of mist snaked by, touched our garments. Another shadowy figure stood off to the side, at the place where we emerged upon a downward-sloping trail. "Coming to die," she said, and I stopped and looked at her. "Lady Carl." Pass on," she said. "Hasten to your doom. You could not know what it means to me." "I loved you once," I said, which was not the right thing to say at all. She shook her head. "The only thing you ever loved, besides yourself, was money. You got it. You killed more people than I know of to keep your empire, Frank. Now there has finally come a man who can take you. I am proud to be present at your doom." I turned on the torch and shone it upon her. Her hair was so red and her features so white. Her face was heart-shaped, and her eyes were green, as I remembered them. For a moment I ached for her. "What if I take him?" I asked. "Then I'm probably going to be yours again for a while," she replied. "But I hope not. You are evil, and I want you to die. I'd find a way myself if you were to have me again." "Stop," said Green. "I brought you back from the dead. I brought this man here to kill him. I was usurped by a human being who, fortunately or unfortunately, is possessed of a similar intention with respect to Sandow. But Frank and I have our fates cast together now. Consider me. I restored you, and I will preserve you. Help us to get at our enemy, and I will reward you." She moved out of the circle of light, and her laughter came down upon us. "No," she called out. "No, thank you." "I once loved you," I said. There was silence then. "Could you do it again?" "I don't really know, but you mean something to me, something important." "Pass on," she said. "All debts be cancelled. Go to Shandon and die." "Please," I said. "Once upon a time when I held you, it meant much to me. Lady Carl, I have never stopped caring for you, even after you left. And it was not I who broke the 10 of Algol, though this is often said." "It was you." "I think I could convince you that it was not." "Don't bother trying. Pass on." "All right," I said. "I won't stop, though." "What? Stop what?" "Caring for you some," I said. "Pass on, please, pass on." And we did. All that time we had been speaking her language, Dralman, and I hadn't even realized that I had switched from English. Funny. "You have loved many women, haven't you, Frank?" asked Green. "Yes." "Were you lying to her about caring for her?" "No." We followed the trail until I could see the lights of the chalet below me. We continued in that direction, and a final figure appeared, drew near. "Nick." "That's right, mister." "It's me, Frank." "By God, I think it is. Come closer, huh?" "Sure. Here's a light." I spilled it all over myself so that he could see. "Jesus, it's really you," he said. "That guy down there is a nut, you know, and he's after you." "Yeah, I know. He wanted me to help get you, and I told him to go indulge in autoeroticism. He was mad. We had a fight. I busted his nose and got the hell out. He didn't come after me, though. He's tough." "I know." "I'm going to help you get him." "Okay. But I don't like that guy you're with." "Nick, all out of the past and storming. It was great." "What do you mean?" "He's the one responsible for the whole thing. He brought me back, and the others. He's a sneaky son of a bitch. If I were you, I'd take him out of the picture real quick." "We're allies now, he and I." Nick spat. "I'm going to get you, mister," he said to Green. "When this whole thing is over, you're mine. Remember those days when you questioned me? It wasn't fun. And now my turn will come." "All right." "No, it isn't. It's not all right at all. You called me Shorty, or the pay and equivalent thereof, you dumb vegetable. When I get my turn, I'll roast you. I'm glad I'm alive again, and I guess I owe that to you. But I'll croak you, you bastard. You've got it coming, and you'd better believe it. I'll take you with anything available." "I doubt it, little man," Green said. "Let's wait and see," I said. So Nick joined us, walking on the other side of me from Green. "Is he down there now?" I asked. "Yes. Do you have a bomb?" "Yes. That would probably be the best way. Make sure he's inside and lob it in through the window." "Is he alone?" "Well, no, but it wouldn't exactly be murder. Once you get the tapes, you can bring back the girl." "Who is she?" "Her name is Kathy. I don't know her." "She was my wife," I said. "Oh, well, I guess that idea's out. We have to go in." "Perhaps," I said. "If we have to, I'll take care of Shandon, and you get Kathy out of the way." "He wouldn't hurt her." "Oh?" "It's been several months since we woke up, Frank. We didn't know where we were or why, and this Green guy said he didn't know any more about it than we did. For all we knew, we were really dead. We only found out about you when he and Mike had the argument. Green dropped his guard one day, and Mike picked his brains, I guess. Anyhow, Mike and the girl, Kathy, yes, sort of have a thing going between them. I guess they're in love." "Green, why didn't you tell me this?" "I did not deem it important. Is it?" I didn't answer because I didn't know. I thought quickly. I leaned my back against a rock and pushed the gas pedal of my mind to the floor. I had set out to find and kill an enemy. Now he stood by my side while I sought a different enemy in his stead. Now to find out that he was shacking up with a resurrected wife I'd come to rescue. This did change things. How, I was not sure. If Kathy was in love with him, I was not about to burst in and shoot him down in front of her. Even if he were just using her, even if he didn't care anything for her, I could not do that, not with him meaning something to her. It seemed that Green's earlier suggestion was the only thing left, to contact him and try to buy him off. He had a new power and a pretty girl. Add to that a wad of money, and he might be persuaded to lay off. It still troubled me, though, that he had tried to kill me with his hands. I could just turn around and go back. I could climb aboard the Model T and in less than a day be scooting toward home free. If she wanted Shandon, let her have him. I could settle my score with Green and return to my fortress. "Yes, it is important," I said. "Does it alter your plans?" Green asked me. "Yes. Just because of the girl?" "Just because of the girl," I said. "You are a strange man, Frank, to come all this way and then change your mind because of a girl who is only an ancient memory to you." "I have a very good memory." I did not like the idea of leaving my name's enemy running around in the body of a capable and clever man who would not mind seeing me dead. It was a combination that could keep me awake nights, even on home free. On the other hand, what good is a dead golden goose, or pigeon, as the case would be? It's funny how, if you live long enough, friends, enemies, lovers, haters move around you, as at a big masked ball, and every now and then there is some mask switching. "What are you going to do?" Nick asked. "I'm going to talk to him, make a deal if I can." "You said he would not sell his Paibadra," said Green. End of Side 3. To continue, turn the cassette over.